The road to Blackwood twisted through an abyss of tangled roots and skeletal trees, their gnarled limbs clawing at the sky. Mr. Abernathy's truck groaned over the crumbling path, the wheels kicking up dust like ancient phantoms rising from their graves. The air was thick, humid, but underneath the scent of damp earth lurked something, metallic, a whisper of rust, of old blood. The silence pressed in like a suffocating shroud. Finally, emerging from the trees, Blackwood Research Facility. A corpse of a building, its concrete hide mottled with decay, its empty windows gaping black like the sockets of a skull. The perimeter fence sagged, rusted and broken in places, as if something had forced its way out rather than in. A heavy gate, still chained, bore deep gouges along the metal. Something had tried to escape. Mr. Abernathy had given no real explanation, just the muttered word, complications, before shoving the keys into my hand. He had avoided my eyes, and his fingers trembled. I hadn't questioned it at the time. But now, standing before the ruin of Blackwood, dread coiled tight in my stomach. The caretaker's cottage sat hunched behind the main building, its roof sagging, its wooden door splintered at the edges. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust and something chemical, sharp, bitter, lingering. As I moved through the cramped space, I ran my fingers over the bookshelves and froze. Deep scratches marred the wood, uneven, frantic, as if someone or something had clawed at it desperately. A chill traced my spine. The sun dipped below the horizon, shadows stretching long and grotesque. The wind rattled the walls, whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. As darkness swallowed the sky, I locked the door. The fire in the stove sputtered weakly, casting jittery light against the walls. I forced myself to write in my journal. Arrived at Blackwood. The quiet isn't peaceful, it watches. That night, the silence wasn't empty. It pulsed. It breathed. The wind outside carried voices, hushed, urgent murmurs that pressed against the walls, slipping through the cracks. I strained to listen, my heart pounding. A floorboard creaked, not from the wind, but from something inside the cottage. I locked the bedroom door and did not sleep. Dawn's light did little to chase away the unease. It hung in the air, clinging to my skin, settling in my bones. I tried to go about my duties, sweeping dust that never seemed to lessen, trimming vines that curled back overnight, but the land and the house was just wrong. As I was clearing weeds in the fading afternoon, I heard a faint, deliberate creak from the main building. The kind of sound wood makes under shifting weight. My breath hitched. The air was dead still. And then a sigh, right behind me. I spun, heart hammering against my ribs. The air unmoved. But the sigh had been so close, so warm, so human. My stomach twisted, the air thickened, pressing down on me. Shadows pooled in corners where no light should have reached. The floorboards creaked again. The whispering grew louder, curling against my ears, sinking into my thoughts. Then a knock, soft and faint. I stood frozen, breath held, staring at the door of the main building. The knock came again, insistent, yet patient. A scrape at the window, a fleeting shadow. The sigh again. Right behind me, my skin crawled. I turned slowly, but there was nothing there. Seeking to shake off the unease, I started to walk the perimeter fence. The sun cast long, ominous shadows. On the far side, I noticed a disturbed section. The wire was bent inward, the metal raw where it had been stressed. On the ground, I saw faint tracks, too large for any common animal, disturbingly similar to human prints, but with an uneven step and a strangely elongated splayed toe. A cold dread washed over me. Who would try to get in here? And why these unnatural tracks? The footprints led to the broken fence and then vanished into the dense undergrowth. I followed them cautiously, my breath shallow. The earth was disturbed, as if something had dragged itself through the dirt. Claw marks marred the soil near one print, deep and deliberate. Nearby, the trees bore fresh gashes, the bark stripped away in long, jagged tears, as if something with massive hands had scraped against them while passing through. I knelt to touch one of the prints. The indentation was deeper than I expected, like something impossibly heavy had pressed into the soil. My fingers brushed against something hard, a bone? A fragment of something brittle, splintered at the edges, buried in the earth. I recoiled, my stomach twisting. The feeling of being watched thickened, pressing against me like unseen hands. The trees loomed closer, their branches shifting without wind. A faint rustling noise crept through the underbrush, deliberate, careful. My pulse pounded in my ears. I turned sharply, scanning the trees. Nothing, just shifting shadows. But the rustling didn't stop. It circled, moving in the brush, following me as I stepped backward toward the cottage. My feet crushed dead leaves, but the sound was swallowed by something else. A low, dragging exhale, the sigh. That same breath, that impossibly close. A presence just out of reach. I ran. The cottage door slammed behind me, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The locks clicked into place under my trembling hands. I backed away, the walls closing in. Silence pressed against my ears. Then, scratching. Faint, just outside the window. Slow, methodical. Claws against glass. The lamps flickered. The shadows pooled deeper. I stood frozen, staring at the window. A smudge of condensation bloomed on the glass. Something was breathing against it from the other side. I bolted the doors. I checked the windows. The locks. Again. Again and again. The wind whispered through the trees, its voice almost familiar. Almost. I did not sleep that night. I sat with my back against the door, listening. The whispers never stopped. Locks mean nothing when something is already inside. The damaged fence and the strange tracks became obsessions, fueling my growing anxiety. Each morning, I found myself standing near that twisted section of metal, staring at the ground where those malformed prints had appeared. I would trace their distorted shapes with my fingers, feeling the deep impressions in the damp soil, as if whatever had left them was far heavier than it should have been. But the most unsettling part was the way they simply vanished. No sign of retreat, no continuation deeper into the woods. Something had come in, but had it ever left? The cottage no longer felt safe. The flimsy locks, the thin wooden walls, none of it provided real protection. My gaze was constantly drawn to the main research building, its silent, rotting form looming like a neglected tomb. The empty windows were nothing more than black voids. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something within watched me, mirroring my own intense observation. At night, the tension thickened. The metallic scent in the air grew stronger, mixing with the ever-present humidity, clinging to my skin like an oil-slick film. And then there was the humming, low, rhythmic, almost imperceptible at first. But once I noticed it, I couldn't ignore it. A vibration deep in the earth, pulsing beneath my feet. It started just after dusk, intensifying as the night deepened. It was always strongest when the dragging sound returned. The first time I heard it again, I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. The wind had died down, and the night was unnervingly still. Then, slow, deliberate, a heavy weight shifting just above me, a sound that should have been impossible. There was no second floor, no attic, and yet something moved. A breath caught in my throat, my body paralyzed as I listened. The dragging came again, closer, more pronounced. My skin crawled with the sensation of something unseen pressing against the fragile boundary of my world. I wanted to believe it was just my imagination, that the isolation was finally gnawing away at my sanity. But I could hear it breathing. I stayed awake until dawn, unable to sleep, my pulse hammering in my ears. The moment the first slivers of sunlight cut through the heavy clouds, the noises ceased. The cottage was silent once more, but I knew now, something else was here. The days passed in a feverish blur of paranoia. My journal became my only refuge, my scattered thoughts spilling onto its pages in increasingly frantic scrawls. The humming intensifies each night. It comes from the main building, a deep pulse like a heartbeat under the floor. The metallic scent grows stronger. Decay or something manufactured? I developed obsessive rituals. The constant checking of locks, the ceaseless pacing along the perimeter fence, the compulsive drawing and redrawing of the curtains, convinced that if I left a single gap uncovered, I'd catch sight of something staring back at me. These small acts offered fleeting illusions of control, but deep down I knew they were meaningless. Blackwood held secrets, and I was drowning in them. One afternoon, a heavy rain battered the landscape, turning the dirt to thick mud. I trudged through the storm, unable to resist my routine patrol. That's when I saw it, something glinting beneath the wet earth near the broken section of fence. I knelt, digging through the muck until my fingers scraped against metal. A corroded plate, half buried, the letters barely visible beneath layers of rust and grime. I wiped it clean, and the words sent a cold spike of dread through my core. Blackwood Research, Project Chimera. Chimera? The word rang through my mind like a death knell. My stomach twisted, the implications settling deep in my bones. The name was wrong. Too monstrous. Too unnatural. I staggered back, the storm howling around me, the sky darkening far too quickly. The clouds churned like living things, thick and suffocating. My breath hitched as a fresh wave of metallic rot flooded my senses, stronger than ever. The world felt suddenly too small, as if I had stepped onto the edge of something vast and unspeakable. Out of the corner of my eye, movement. Beyond the broken fence, deep within the skeletal trees, something shifted, a fleeting distortion. Not a shape, but the absence of one. Something too dark, too fluid, folding into the shadows. My pulse roared in my ears. I stumbled back, nearly losing my footing in the slick mud. I ran without looking back. By the time I reached the cottage, I was soaked to the bone, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the locks. I collapsed inside, pressing my back against the door, gasping for breath. I needed answers. Abernathy had warned me to stay out of the main building, but his warning meant nothing now. The secrets buried inside those walls were clawing their way to the surface. I had to know. I retrieved the keys from my bag, my fingers hovering over the worn metal. I had tried them all before, had spent sleepless nights testing each rusted lock, only to find every door sealed tight. Except one. A small key marked Sec 3 had never fit anything in the cottage. My heart pounded as I ran my thumb over the engraved letters. I had never tried it on the main building. A sick excitement curled in my gut, warring with the fear that gripped my chest. Curiosity won. Clutching the key tightly, I stepped out into the storm, the wind howling like a chorus of unseen voices. The facility loomed before me, its jagged silhouette barely visible through the rain. Each step felt heavier, as though the very ground resisted my approach. The side entrance was nearly hidden, a rusted metal door swallowed by creeping vines. My hand trembled as I slid the key into the lock. It turned with an unnatural smoothness. A click. The wind died abruptly, the silence stretching impossibly long. A weight pressed against my shoulders, an oppressive force that made the very air feel thick. I pushed the door open. A wave of rot and metallic blood flooded my senses. The darkness inside wasn't empty. It was absolute, swallowing my flashlight beam like a bottomless void. I crossed the threshold, and something was waiting. The interior of the research facility was a disorienting labyrinth of decaying laboratories and silent offices. A place long abandoned, yet still breathing with the echoes of forgotten horrors. My flashlight's feeble beam cut through the dense, dust-choked air, illuminating shattered glass and broken equipment scattered across the floor. Test tubes lay overturned on rusted metal tables, their surfaces coated in filth and something darker, dried residue that looked disturbingly organic. The walls, once pristine, were now cracked and peeling, revealing layers of stained concrete beneath. Faint imprints of old whiteboards still clung to the walls, chemical equations and anatomical sketches barely visible through decades of neglect. But the deeper I ventured, the more unnatural the environment became. It wasn't just the decay, it was the feeling that something in this place remained unfinished, as though whatever terrible work had begun here had never truly ended. It started as a faint vibration beneath my feet, a resonance in the very bones of the structure. But with each step, it grew stronger, swelling into a low, guttural frequency that pressed against my chest, making my ribs vibrate. It wasn't just sound, it was movement, a pulse within the walls, alive and breathing. I followed it, weaving through collapsed doorways and overturned desks, deeper into the heart of the facility. The air grew thick, cloying with the sickly metallic scent that had haunted me since my arrival. It was overwhelming now, suffocating. The taste of iron coated my tongue. As I turned a corner, I found it, a vast laboratory. The walls lined with shattered observation windows, their glass jagged like teeth. Rusted cabinets loomed in the corners, their doors hanging open, filled with crumbling files and discarded vials. A massive metal cage dominated the center of the room, at least 8 feet tall, its bars thick and reinforced. But something had twisted them apart. The metal was warped, bent outward as if something inside had forced its way free. I stepped closer, my boots crunching over shattered instruments. The air around the cage was different, colder. The symbols came next, etched into the surrounding walls, a jagged script I didn't recognize. Some looked hastily carved, deep gouges into the concrete, while others were written in what I could only assume was blood, their edges smeared as if by frantic hands. My head pounded. The humming was almost unbearable now, resonating inside my skull. I forced myself to step back, nausea rising as the metallic stench thickened. A door slammed shut behind me. The crack of metal against metal sent a violent jolt through my body. My breath caught in my throat. My flashlight trembled in my grip as I whirled around, its beams sweeping frantically across the room. The lab was empty. No wind, no movement, nothing, except for the whispers. At first they were so faint I thought they were a trick of my exhausted mind, a gentle rustling like paper shifting in a breeze. But then they grew, hushed, frantic voices rising in an uproar of sound, a chorus of urgent dread coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. I stumbled back, my boot catching on a fallen tray. It clattered to the floor, the sound splitting through the whispers like a gunshot. And they reacted. The voices surged, overlapping, frenzied, pressing against my ears. No words, just sound, like something trying to speak but unable to form the language. Then I saw it, a shadow, darting across the far doorway, a flicker of movement just at the edge of my vision. I spun, my flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. Nothing. Cold terror curled around my spine, tightening its grip. My thoughts were unraveling. Had I imagined it? Or was something moving in the unseen spaces, just beyond the edges of the light? I needed to leave. Now, a creaking staircase loomed to my right, its steps shrouded in darkness. Against all reason, I found myself climbing, drawn by some terrible compulsion. With every step, the whispers shifted, changing, no longer just gibberish, but something else. They were speaking my name. I stopped dead. My pulse roared in my ears. The voices stretched and distorted, an echo of my own name repeated in 100 overlapping tones, some high and breathless, others guttural and wrong. The third floor, the archive room. Rows of rusted filing cabinets stood like sentinels in the dim glow of my flashlight. Dust-coated files lay strewn across the floor, their pages curling at the edges. I knelt, my shaking hands flipping through yellowed papers. Project Chimera. The words lipped off the page. I tore the file open. Genetic manipulation, hybrid experimentation, monstrous creations, mental collapse. Diagrams filled the pages, human figures twisted beyond recognition, limbs elongated, torsos stretched into unnatural forms. My breath came in ragged gasps as I flipped through image after image of grotesque mutations, each one worse than the last. The humming stopped, the lights flickered, then they died. Total darkness swallowed the room. The silence was deafening, until the whispers returned, louder, closer. The darkness in the archive room was absolute. Not the natural kind of darkness, but a suffocating void that pressed against my skin, seeping into my lungs with each ragged breath. The whispers swirled, no longer disembodied but close. A chorus of shrill voices, mere inches from my ears, their tones hissing, urgent, wrong. The words were alien, guttural, yet there was something disturbingly familiar in their cadence, like a half-forgotten lullaby sung in a language never meant for human tongues. An icy touch on my neck lingered, burning in reverse, a sensation both real and impossible. A warning, a claim. I couldn't move. My limbs refused to obey, my body locked in place as if something unseen held me there, keeping me still. The weight of the darkness was unbearable, pressing down, constricting. My mind clawed for rationality, for logic, but there was none to be found. Only the whispers, only the cold. Cold air brushed against my neck, a sensation that was impossible, unbearable, something breathing behind me. I froze, every muscle locked in place. My flashlight lay on the floor where I had dropped it, its beam casting a weak, slanted glow. The whispers pressed in, not just sound but presence, coiling around me like invisible fingers. They were inside my skull, pushing, clawing. Suddenly a voice, distinct from the others, low, rasping, inches from my ear. I screamed. The files flew from my hands as I staggered back, my foot catching on something unseen. I fell hard, the impact sending a shockwave of pain through my side. The darkness pressed closer, suffocating, bodies unseen brushing against my skin, whispers slipping beneath my flesh. I dropped to my knees, frantically sweeping my free hand across the floor. My flashlight, where was it? Dust and debris clouded my fingers, but the light was gone, swallowed by the darkness. The whispers deepened, burrowing into my mind. They weren't just sound anymore, they were thoughts, invasive, insidious. You were never meant to leave. My breath hitched. You are already ours. Shadows flickered in the blackness, shifting in my peripheral vision. I saw movement. Silhouettes, jagged and wrong, crawling just beyond sight. Something touched me. Something tugged on my jacket. I choked on a scream, my instincts overriding thought. I lashed out, swinging wildly in the direction of the unseen grip. The impact was immediate. A dull, sickening thud, a gurgled, wet exhalation, silence. My breath came in shuddering gasps. My fingers trembled, my mind racing with frantic questions. Had I hit something? Something real? Or had the madness taken me completely? I didn't wait to find out. I clawed for the flashlight, my fingers closing around the cold metal. The beam flared as I swung it wildly. Shadows twisted in its light, figures shifting in the periphery, shapes that melted as soon as I looked directly at them. Something moved in the doorway. Not a shadow. Something solid, tall, unnatural. A glimpse of two long limbs, a body hunched as if it barely fit the space, fingers tipped in something wrong. I ran. I moved blindly, my shoulder colliding with shelves, my legs stumbling over scattered papers. The air in the room had changed. It was thicker now, like walking through unseen tendrils. My skin tingled with the sensation of unseen things brushing past. Somewhere in the distance, a door creaked open. No wind, no reason for it to move. I stumbled forward. The cold metal of the door handle sent a shock through my skin. I wrenched it open, stepping into the corridor beyond. The dim flashlight flickered weakly, casting erratic shadows. The air was stagnant, but no longer filled with whispers. That should have been a relief. It wasn't. The silence here was worse. It wasn't just the absence of sound, it was the expectation of it. Like something unseen was holding its breath, waiting for me to make the next move. Then I heard it, a dragging sound, low, rhythmic, closer. My breath came in shallow gasps. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. It wasn't the sound of something being pulled, it was the sound of something pulling itself. Every shadow became a threat. Every breath of air against my skin felt like fingers reaching out. I pressed forward, forcing my body to move despite the terror clawing at my spine. Down the stairs, through the corridor, the voices shrieking now, walls vibrating with something alive and hungry. My breath was a ragged, tearing thing, my legs numb as I hurtled toward the exit. A door loomed ahead, slightly ajar. I slammed into it, crashing through into the night. The moment I reached the threshold, the dragging sound surged forward. A sudden rush, a guttural, rasping breath behind me. The storm had returned, wind screaming through the trees. The research facility stood behind me, silent, but I knew I had not escaped. I had only woken something up. I turned toward the cottage. I didn't dare look back. Every instinct screamed at me to keep moving, to run, but I felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing into my back, following, waiting. I reached the cottage in record time, my legs nearly giving out as I crashed through the door. My hands fumbled with the lock, my fingers clumsy and weak. The bolt slid into place with a reassuring click. I grabbed the nearest piece of furniture, a heavy wooden chair, and shoved it against the door. My hands moved frantically, dragging whatever I could find, building a makeshift barricade. It would stop them. Nothing would. But the illusion of safety was the only thing keeping me from unraveling completely. I collapsed into the corner, my back pressed against the wall. The flashlight still clutched in my white-knuckled grip. My breath came in short, broken gasps. The room was still, and yet the whispers had followed. They weren't loud now, not like before. They didn't need to be. They were there, woven into the silence, slipping through the cracks, breathing beneath the floorboards. They seeped through the walls, curled beneath the door, slithered through the cracks in my mind. They were no longer just sounds, they were thoughts, twisting into grotesque shapes, hollowing me out from the inside. I pressed my hands against my ears, but it was useless. The voices weren't outside anymore, they were me. The dragging sound returned, right outside the door, slow, heavy. The unmistakable wet thuds of something massive, something grotesque, something no longer bound by the laws of flesh and bone. My breath hitched, my vision tunneling. The door frame trembled. Something was pressing against it. I squeezed my eyes shut. If I couldn't see it, maybe it wasn't real. Maybe I was hallucinating. Maybe I had already lost my mind. But the sound of splintering wood shattered that illusion. I peeked through my trembling fingers. The room shifted around me, the walls pulsing as if alive. The darkness breathed, its shadows writhing like living things, forming shapes. Things with too many limbs, too many mouths. Chimeras. They see you now. The thought wasn't my own. It came from them, whispered directly into the hollow spaces of my mind. I tried to stand, but my legs refused to move. The cold floor beneath me pulsed, a slow, sick rhythm matching the beating of something vast just beyond my perception. The door rattled violently. A scream tore from my throat, but even that felt stolen, swallowed by the ever-thickening silence of Blackwood. Then, with a final crack, the caved inward. A figure stood in the ruined threshold, silhouetted against the void of the night. Tall, gaunt, vaguely human, but subtly, terrifyingly wrong. It took a step forward and the air changed. The cold deepened. The walls no longer felt solid, the room stretching outward like some infinite, impossible space. The thing did not speak, but its presence filled the room. An oppressive wave of alien intelligence. It was watching me, studying, judging. My body recoiled before my mind could catch up. I grasped at the flashlight with shaking fingers, my only weapon against something beyond comprehension. The creature took another step. I swung with all the strength I had left. The impact landed, a sickening crack. The weight of it reverberated up my arm, sending a jolt of pain through my wrist. But the figure did not flinch. Instead, it tilted its head, as if amused, its luminous eyes fixing on me with an unnatural, unwavering intensity. Then it spoke. Not with a voice, but with a chorus of whispers. All the voices I had heard since stepping foot in this cursed place, now focused, directed inside me. The words were gibberish, yet I understood. They were welcoming me. The thing stepped closer, its skeletal hand reaching out. A final surge of survival instinct screamed through me, but it was weak, fleeting, drowned beneath the growing pull of something deeper. A calm washed over me. It was wrong, it was unnatural, but it was there. The terror remained, but something else overshadowed it. A sensation I couldn't name, a certainty. I had never been meant to escape. The cold fingers wrapped around my wrist. A jolt of something shot through me. Neither pain nor pleasure, but a raw, elemental energy. My breath caught, my vision blurred, and the room around me melted, shifting in and out of focus. The whispers intensified. They no longer spoke to me. They became me. I felt myself unraveling. My skin no longer felt like my own. My mind expanded, stretching far beyond the limits of my skull. Images flashed before me, faces not my own, eyes filled with the same eerie glow that now reflected in the thing before me. The voice inside me spoke of transformation, of merging, of becoming something new. I looked up, and the thing held me in its gaze. I saw my own reflection in its eyes. A face stared back at me, but it wasn't mine. Gaunt, pale, its mouth twisted into a grin that did not belong to me, and yet it was me. I had been changed. Or perhaps I had always been this. The whispers faded. The silence of Blackwood remained. The chimera had found its final embrace, and I was no longer afraid. Mr. Abernathy arrived just after sunrise, the sky a muted shade of gray, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. He parked his rusted truck near the overgrown path leading to the cottage, stepping out with the slow, practiced movements of a man accustomed to grim tasks. The door was shattered, just as he expected, splintered wood and twisted hinges. He sighed, rubbing his weathered hands together before retrieving his toolbox from the truck bed. Inside, the cottage was still. The air carried a lingering chill, the kind that had nothing to do with the morning breeze. The floor was coated in dust, yet the footprints were wrong. Uneven, distorted, shifting in ways that made his stomach tighten. The caretaker's chair remained where he had left it, angled toward the fireplace, but the journal was gone. Of course it was. They never left anything behind. Mr. Abernathy knew better than to dwell on it. He set to work, sweeping away the debris, installing a new door with the efficiency of a man who had done it many times before. The silence pressed in around him, thick and watchful. He could feel it, the unseen presence that had lurked in Blackwood since long before his time. It had taken another, and the cycle would begin again. He checked the kitchen, straightened the furniture, and dusted the shelves. By afternoon, the cottage looked as if nothing had ever happened. Nothing ever did, not officially. The new door stood firm, freshly painted. The locks worked. The key was returned to its place. By sunset, Mr. Abernathy leaned against his truck, staring at the cottage, the wind whispering through the trees. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. A name, a date. The next arrival would be here by the end of the week, and Blackwood would welcome them home. With one last glance at the darkened windows, he climbed into his truck and drove away, leaving the silence undisturbed. For now,